Chosen one, it's no accident you're watching this video right now. Something within you resonated with this topic. Something deep recognized a truth that perhaps you've sensed but never fully articulated. That feeling of being different, of not quite fitting in, isn't a flaw. It might just be an indicator of your calling. Today I want to talk about a reality many chosen people experience. The difficulty of being in crowds, of feeling comfortable in large groups. Have you ever felt drained after social interactions for no apparent reason? Have you noticed you prefer deep conversations with a few close friends over superficial interactions with many? Have you sensed something within you vibrating differently in certain environments or near certain people? This experience isn't uncommon for those who carry a heightened spiritual sensitivity. The chosen often carry a light that, without realizing it, illuminates the dark corners around them. This light, a reflection of your spiritual connection, can make you an unintentional catalyst. Your mere presence sometimes discomforts those who aren't ready to face their own shadows, or inspires those who yearn for something deeper. This journey we're about to explore isn't about isolating yourself from the world or judging others. On the contrary, it's about understanding the nature of your calling and how to navigate the unique challenges it presents. It's about learning to honor your sensitivity while still fulfilling your purpose of impacting lives. Before we continue, I want you to know you're not alone in this experience. Many before us have walked similar paths, from Elijah in the wilderness to John the Baptist in the desert, from Paul on his missionary journeys to Jesus seeking solitude for prayer. If this message is already speaking to your heart, leave a comment saying, "I recognize my calling as a chosen one," and hit the like button so we can reach more people who, like you, are seeking to understand their unique place in God's plan. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of discovery with us. Now let's delve deeper into understanding this extraordinary sensitivity the chosen ones carry. Have you ever felt like you can perceive things others don't notice? Like you can sense the atmosphere of a room as soon as you enter it? This isn't just your imagination or hypersensitivity. What you're experiencing is a form of spiritual discernment, a heightened ability many chosen ones possess. This spiritual sensitivity is like an antenna that picks up frequencies others don't perceive. You can walk into a room and immediately feel if there's peace or conflict, love or resentment, truth or deception. While many navigate life using only their 5 physical senses, you've been gifted with an additional sense that perceives the unseen, that feels the intangible. But this gift, while powerful, also carries a weight. In a world where most people ignore or disregard spiritual realities, you perceive them constantly. It's like trying to sleep while all your senses are on high alert. It's no wonder you often feel overwhelmed in crowded environments, where spiritual energies mix and collide like waves in a stormy sea. This sensitivity causes you to absorb not only the words spoken, but also the unexpressed emotions, the hidden intentions, the inner conflicts people carry. In large groups, this can become a sensory overload that drains your energy and leaves you exhausted, even when nothing particularly stressful has happened physically. Understanding this reality is the first step to managing this gift without being consumed by it. You're not overreacting or being dramatic when you feel the need to withdraw from crowds or when you need time to recover after intense social interactions. You're simply responding to a level of input that many around you don't recognize. The chosen often find they need more quiet time, more spaces of solitude to process and release everything they've absorbed. This isn't a weakness, but a legitimate need, just as someone with keen eyesight might need sunglasses in very bright environments. Recognizing and honoring your spiritual sensitivity is essential for your health and well-being. Ignoring it, or trying to suppress it to fit in, would be like a musician trying to ignore their ability to distinguish notes, not just frustrating, but contrary to your own nature and purpose. This sensitivity, when embraced and directed correctly, becomes a powerful tool that allows you to discern situations with clarity, to perceive unspoken needs, to offer a timely word that touches people's hearts. It's a gift that, although it sometimes feels like a burden, was granted for a greater divine purpose that is still unfolding in your life. There's a fascinating paradox many chosen ones experience. While possessing an extraordinary capacity for deep and meaningful connections, they often feel fundamentally isolated. This apparent contradiction reveals much about the nature of the spiritual calling they carry. When you encounter someone with whom you can truly share, the connection is almost instantaneous and transcends common social formalities. It's as if your souls recognize each other, as if they speak a language few understand. These connections are rarely superficial. They tend to go straight to the core, to the issues that really matter, to the deepest truths of existence. However, these genuine connections are rare. Most social interactions remain on the surface, revolving around trivial matters, fleeting opinions, or simple exchanges of practical information. For many people, this is sufficient and comfortable. For you, the chosen one, it often feels empty and unsatisfying. That's why you can be surrounded by people actively participating in a conversation and still feel profoundly alone. It's not the physical presence of others that satisfies your need for connection, but the presence of souls that vibrate on the same spiritual frequency as yours. In the absence of these authentic connections, isolation sets in, even amidst the crowd. This solitude isn't necessarily negative. Often, it's in these moments of apparent isolation that you experience the deepest connections with the divine. It's as if the space created by the absence of superficial human connections is filled by a deeper, more eternal presence. In moments of solitude, you often find clarity, direction, and a peace that surpasses understanding. Remember that many of the great souls who transformed the world experienced this same paradox. They were simultaneously deeply connected with humanity, understanding its pain and aspirations, and yet set apart, walking paths few could follow. This paradox isn't a flaw in your spiritual design, but an intentional feature. The tension between connection and isolation creates a dynamic space where growth occurs, where wisdom develops, where compassion deepens without being diluted by social conformity. Instead of fighting against this paradox or feeling defective for experiencing it, recognize it as an integral part of your journey as a chosen one. It's precisely this tension that allows you to be simultaneously a part of this world and yet not completely defined by its norms and expectations. The challenge for you isn't to eliminate this paradox, but to learn to inhabit it with grace, allowing both your moments of deep connection and your periods of apparent isolation to shape you and prepare you for the unique purpose you were destined to fulfill. There's a hunger in your spirit that goes beyond the simple desire for companionship. As a chosen one, you yearn for conversations that transcend the weather, the news of the day, or the latest trends. Your heart seeks dialogues that touch the soul, that explore the mysteries of faith, that question the purposes of existence, that genuinely share the struggles and victories of the spiritual journey. When you participate in superficial conversations, you often find yourself thinking, there's so much more to discuss, so much more to explore. It can be frustrating when social interactions rarely go beyond that outer layer. It's like being hungry before a banquet of food without nutritional substance. The table is full, but the food doesn't satisfy. This quest for depth isn't arrogance or elitism. It's simply a reflection of the nature of your calling. You've been awakened to realities that go beyond the material and the immediate, and you naturally desire to share and explore these dimensions with others. When that doesn't happen, the feeling of disconnect can be intense. On social media, you might notice how interactions tend to be even more superficial: likes, brief comments, quick opinions without deep reflection. While many find satisfaction in that level of engagement, you often feel empty after hours of endlessly scrolling through content. Your spirit seeks nourishment that these interactions rarely offer. Even in religious settings, you can feel this same frustration. Conversations that remain at the level of spiritual cliches, theological discussions that don't connect with real life, faith sharing that avoids vulnerability. All this can leave you with a sense that something is missing, that there are deeper waters to be explored. This quest for authenticity and depth often leads you to prefer small circles of friends or even contemplative solitude. Not because you don't like people, but because you value the quality of connection over the quantity of interactions. A single, meaningful dialogue can nourish your spirit for days, while hours of superficial conversation can leave you exhausted and unsatisfied. Recognize this pattern not as a social failing, but as a reflection of the depth to which you've been called. At the same time, develop patience and compassion. Not everyone is at the same point in their spiritual journey, and even seemingly, superficial conversations can be opportunities to sow small seeds of truth that, with time, can blossom into something deeper. Learn to discern when to invest more deeply in an interaction, and when to gracefully accept the limits of the moment. This wisdom will help you navigate the social world without losing your essence or exhausting your energies in frustrated attempts to transform every conversation into an exploration of spiritual depths. Have you ever noticed how your presence seems to provoke intense reactions in people, even when you don't say or do anything particularly extraordinary? This phenomenon isn't your imagination. As a chosen one, you carry a presence that often acts as a spiritual mirror for those around you. Some people are instantly drawn to you, feeling inexplicably comforted, inspired, or understood in your presence. They may confide in you quickly, sharing vulnerabilities they would normally keep to themselves. It's as if they recognize, even unconsciously, the light you carry and are naturally drawn to it like plants seeking the sun. On the other hand, there are those who seem inexplicably uncomfortable or even hostile in your presence. Without any provocation on your part, they may become defensive, critical, or distant. This happens because your authenticity and spiritual connection often expose by mere contrast the masks and defenses others have built. Like a light shining into a dark room, your presence can reveal what was hidden, not intentionally but simply by the nature of what you carry. This dynamic can be disconcerting. One moment, someone is opening up deeply to you. The next, another person seems to be avoiding you for no apparent reason. This can make larger social environments emotional and spiritual minefields to navigate. Understand that these reactions are rarely about you personally, but about what your presence awakens in others. When someone reacts negatively, they are often responding to their own insecurities, fears, or areas of growth they aren't yet ready to confront. Similarly, when someone is positively impacted by you, they are responding to the resonance between what you manifest and what they themselves aspire to be or experience. This reality was lived by Jesus in a supreme way. His presence provoked extreme reactions, from absolute devotion to violent hostility. He taught that this would be the destiny of those who followed him. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. John 15:18-19 NIV. Recognizing this dynamic can help you not to take others' reactions personally. Instead of constantly asking yourself, what did I do wrong when someone reacts negatively? Or what did I do that was so special? When someone is deeply touched, you can understand that you are simply being a conduit through which spiritual light operates. This understanding doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to act with love and wisdom, but it offers a perspective that allows you to navigate complex social waters with more grace, discernment, and compassion, both for others and for yourself. Living as a chosen one in today's world presents a constant balancing act. On one hand, you feel the call to a life of spiritual purpose, deep contemplation, and radical authenticity. On the other, you face social, professional, and even religious expectations that often seem to pull you in the opposite direction. Contemporary society values hyperconnectivity. We are expected to be constantly available, actively participating in social networks, social events, community groups, and collective activities. Isolation is often viewed with suspicion, and the need for alone time can be interpreted as antisocial, arrogant, or even depressive. Even in religious circles, there is often an expectation of constant engagement, participation in multiple ministries, attendance at every church event, continuous availability to serve. While service is a natural expression of faith, the frantic pace of activities can contradict the deep need for quiet and contemplation that many chosen ones experience. In the professional environment, the demands of networking, teamwork, and constant communication can seem overwhelming for someone whose strength often comes from moments of solitary reflection and deep concentration. The model of the extroverted and charismatic leader is often celebrated, while quiet, reflective, and profound leadership is undervalued. How then do you honor your unique calling while still functioning effectively in the world around you? The secret isn't in choosing an extreme, total isolation or complete conformity, but in finding a sustainable rhythm that honors your nature while still keeping you connected. Establishing clear boundaries becomes not just a preference, but a spiritual necessity. This can mean setting aside specific days for solitude, creating regular periods without technology, or learning to say no to certain commitments without feeling guilty. These boundaries aren't signs of selfishness, but a wise recognition of the conditions necessary for you to flourish in your calling. At the same time, it's important to cultivate the connections that truly nourish your soul, those few relationships where authenticity flourishes, where your sensitivity is understood, where you can be completely yourself. These become oases in the desert of social superficiality, places of refuge and renewal. Remember that Jesus perfectly modeled this balance. He ministered to the crowds, but regularly withdrew to lonely places to pray. He had an inner circle of disciples, but also moments when he needed to be alone with the Father. He understood the vital rhythm of engagement and withdrawal, of giving himself to others, and of renewing himself in solitude. This balance won't be achieved perfectly overnight. It's a continuous dance, a constant adjustment based on attentive listening to the Spirit and honest self-knowledge. But it's a dance that, when learned, allows you to fully live your calling without being consumed by the demands that surround you. The solitude that many fear and avoid can become, for the chosen one, a precious sanctuary. Those moments when you're finally alone, without the noise of others' opinions, without the pressure to conform to social expectations, without the fatigue of navigating the complexities of human interactions, often reveal themselves as the richest moments of your spiritual experience. It's in solitude that you can often hear most clearly that still small voice of God that is easily lost in the noise of the crowd. It's there, in the respectful silence of your closed room, on solitary walks in nature, or in the quiet moments, before the world awakens, that you find that intimate connection that your soul so longs for. This experience echoes that of many who came before you. Moses found his calling in the isolation of the desert. Elijah heard the Lord's still, small voice, not in the strong wind, the earthquake, or the fire, but in the silence that followed. John the Baptist was shaped in the wilderness before beginning his public ministry. Jesus himself constantly sought lonely places to pray, especially before important decisions or after intense periods of ministry. Solitude, when embraced as a sacred space and not feared as a void to be filled, becomes fertile ground where deep spiritual roots can develop. It's the place where your identity solidifies not in external opinions, but in eternal truth. It's where your vision clarifies, not through the lens of social approval, but through the perspective of eternity. In these moments of intimate communion, you often discover that you are never truly alone. There's a presence that fills the silence, a companionship that satisfies more deeply than 1,000 superficial conversations. This is the paradoxical solitude of the chosen one, being seemingly separated from others only to discover a deeper connection with the source of all life. Your need for these moments isn't a character flaw or a social disability. It's a legitimate spiritual need, as vital as the air you breathe. It's the intuitive recognition that, to give to others, you first need to receive. To speak words that transform, you first need to listen. To carry light to dark places, you first need to abide in the presence of the one who is the light. Learn to treasure these moments, to create space for them amidst the constant demands of life. Defend these sacred times as a gardener protects precious seeds, not out of selfishness, but out of the recognition of what will eventually blossom from them for the benefit of many. Solitude embraced with purpose doesn't lead to destructive isolation, but to authentic connection, first with God, then with yourself, and finally, more meaningfully, with those you are called to serve. As a chosen one, you constantly walk a fine line, needing space to nurture your spiritual sensitivity without withdrawing completely from the world that needs your impact. Establishing healthy boundaries isn't selfishness, it's essential. Spiritual stewardship to sustain the calling you carry. Think of boundaries like the banks of a river. Without defined banks, the water spreads out, becoming a stagnant swamp without direction or force. With proper banks, the river flows with purpose and power. Similarly, without clear boundaries, your spiritual energy can dissipate in 1,000 directions, leaving you drained and ineffective. With appropriate boundaries, your influence flows with greater impact precisely because it's channeled with wisdom. Establishing boundaries begins with honest self-awareness. Pay attention to the situations, people, and environments that consistently drain your spiritual energy. Also, observe those that renew and strengthen it. This discernment isn't about judging the worth of others, but about recognizing your own unique spiritual design and the conditions in which you thrive. Practical boundaries might include setting aside specific days for recharging, creating regular periods without technology, or establishing a maximum number of social engagements per week. It may mean limiting time spent in environments you know are particularly challenging for your sensitivity. Communicating your boundaries with grace is an art you'll need to cultivate. "I won't be able to make it on this occasion" is a complete response that doesn't require elaborate justifications. "I need some time to recharge" is an honest explanation that models authenticity for others. Remember that setting boundaries doesn't mean building walls. Walls isolate completely. Healthy boundaries simply define where you end and where the other person begins. They allow controlled connection rather than disordered merging or total isolation. Jesus perfectly demonstrated this balance. He was approachable, but not constantly available. He loved the crowds, but didn't allow their demands to dictate his movements. He responded to needs, but also regularly withdrew to restore his connection with the Father. When you establish healthy boundaries, you'll inevitably encounter resistance. People accustomed to having unlimited access to you may feel confused or even hurt. Some will misinterpret your boundaries as personal rejection. This is an opportunity to gently model a profound truth, that taking care of your spiritual health empowers you to be more genuinely present in the relationships you maintain. Over time, those who truly care about you will respect your boundaries, recognizing that they allow you to offer your most authentic and impactful presence. And those who consistently disrespect your boundaries reveal by their actions that they are more interested in what you can do for them than in who you really are. A valuable clarity, albeit sometimes painful. When you walk as a chosen one, in a world that often doesn't understand your nature, the temptation to question your identity can be intense. The external voices, whether explicit criticisms or subtle pressures to conform, can begin to infiltrate your inner dialogue, causing you to doubt the unique calling you carry. The fundamental truth you need to anchor deeply in your being is this: your identity isn't determined by the understanding or approval of others. It's established in the unchanging reality of who you are in Christ, loved unconditionally, called intentionally, and equipped specifically for a purpose that transcends public opinion. This identity isn't something you earn through performance or lose through failure. It doesn't increase with applause nor diminish with criticism. It's a received gift, a reality established in the heart of the Creator, even before the foundation of the world. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good, works which God prepared in advance for us to do. Ephesians 2:10 NIV. Strengthening this identity requires intentional spiritual practices. Immerse yourself daily in Scripture, not just as a religious exercise, but as a living encounter with the truth that defines who you really are. Let the divine words rewrite the false narratives you may have internalized. Cultivate relationships with those rare individuals who see and affirm your authentic calling. These are precious gifts, people who don't try to mold you in their own image, but who celebrate the unique design God established in you. Even if they are few, these relationships serve as true mirrors, reflecting back to you the image you sometimes lose sight of. Learn to distinguish between constructive conviction and destructive condemnation. The former gently guides you back to your true self when you stray. The latter tries to convince you that your true self is the problem. One comes from the Spirit, who gives life. The other from the enemy, who seeks to steal your confidence and purpose. In the moments when the misunderstanding of others seems especially painful, remember that this is an age-old pattern in the spiritual realm. The prophets were ridiculed, the apostles were persecuted, and Christ himself was rejected by those who should have recognized him. Being in good company doesn't always mean being popular. Allow misunderstanding to become not a reason to doubt, but an opportunity to deepen your reliance on the one who understands you perfectly. Let moments of solitude propel you not to bitter isolation, but to a deeper intimacy with God. As your identity solidifies in this eternal truth, you'll discover an astonishing freedom, the freedom to be fully yourself without the need for explanations or apologies, the freedom to walk in your unique calling with a quiet confidence that transcends both the approval and the criticism of men. What many see as simple social dynamics, you often perceive as something deeper. As a chosen one, you develop a heightened awareness of the spiritual battles that occur in seemingly mundane spaces, family gatherings, work environments, social events, and even religious meetings. This perception isn't paranoia, it's discernment. You intuitively recognize that there's more at stake in human interactions than simply words exchanged and impressions formed. There are invisible currents of spiritual influence flowing constantly, and you feel them with an intensity that others may not experience. In larger social environments, these currents intensify and intertwine in complex ways. Different spiritual agendas collide, conflicting values compete for dominance, and the result is often a charged atmosphere that you absorb like a spiritual sponge. What for others may be just a tiring meeting, for you can be an invisible battlefield that leaves very real marks on your spirit. This aspect of your calling demands consistent spiritual preparation before entering challenging social environments. Just as a soldier doesn't go into battle without proper gear, you can't navigate these complex spiritual realities without your spiritual armor intact. Prayer isn't just a devotional activity, but an essential protective strategy. Before significant social events, set aside time to engage in intentional prayer, not just for yourself but for the environment you're about to enter. This practice not only strengthens you, but can also subtly transform the spiritual atmosphere of the place. Learn to recognize when a battle is yours to fight and when it's wise to simply observe and pray. Not every spiritually charged situation requires your active engagement. Sometimes your silent presence, anchored in inner peace, does more to influence an environment than many words could accomplish. In moments when you're called to speak or act, trust divine wisdom to guide your words. A single spirit-inspired sentence can dissipate tensions that extensive arguments couldn't resolve. A simple act of kindness can break chains of negativity that have resisted more elaborate efforts. Also, recognize the signs of spiritual fatigue after these engagements. Just as physical combat exhausts the body, spiritual warfare drains your inner reserves. Honor this reality by planning recovery times after intense social interactions, moments of silence, prayer, worship, or simple rest that allow your spirit to restore itself. Always remember that you're not alone in these battles. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. 1 John 4:4 KJV. This truth isn't just a theological comfort, but a practical reality that sustains you when the unseen pressures seem too intense to bear alone.